The royal vessel Astraeon had never failed its purpose. It carried the heir to the Zelther Dominion across secure space lanes under the highest protection protocols in the system. Every corridor was monitored. Every system was redundant. Every crew member had been selected for precision, discipline, and absolute adherence to procedure. So when the emergency alarms triggered in the prince's quarters, the response was immediate and perfectly structured. No panic, no deviation, only protocol. Prince Kael Vorith had collapsed during transit. By the time the royal medical team reached him, the situation had already been classified. Critical condition, unknown cause, stabilization priority set. The Dominion's senior medic, Dr. Selktaver, initiated the standard sequence without hesitation. Diagnostic scans were deployed. Intravenous stabilizers were prepared. Neural monitors were calibrated. Everything proceeded exactly as trained. But the readings didn't align. The prince's vitals were deteriorating in a pattern that did not match any known physiological failure within Zelther biology. Oxygen exchange remained stable. Cardiac rhythm fluctuated irregularly. Neural activity showed signs of cascading disruption rather than a single-point failure. Selk adjusted the parameters. Ran a secondary diagnostic. Then a tertiary one. Each result deepened the inconsistency. Time passed. Not long by human standards, but long enough in a critical medical emergency. Begin containment protocol, Selk ordered. We isolate and stabilize before further intervention. A containment field was activated around the prince's body to limit external interference and maintain environmental consistency. Additional medication was administered according to established emergency guidelines. But the prince's condition continued to decline. Another medic suggested escalating the dosage. Another proposed recalibrating the neural interface. Each suggestion remained within protocol boundaries. Each action remained compliant. And yet nothing worked. In the adjacent chamber, a human was observing. Dr. Vance. She had been assigned to the vessel as part of a cross-species medical exchange program, intended more as a diplomatic inclusion than an operational necessity. Her presence had been acknowledged, but not integrated into the active response. Human medical practices, while respected, were not considered immediately applicable in Zelther royal cases. Not unless explicitly requested, which, according to Dominion protocol, had not occurred. Mara watched the diagnostic feeds. She reviewed the data independently, and within moments, she noticed something the team had not addressed. The containment field. It was designed to stabilize external variables, but it was also subtly interfering with the prince's internal bioelectric regulation. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to disrupt compensation mechanisms in a system already under strain. She requested access to the live feed channel. Denied. Not due to hostility but due to hierarchy. Her authorization level did not permit direct intervention in a royal medical case. Protocol required formal escalation through Dominion command. Mara didn't argue. She simply observed further. Then she spoke to one of the attending officers. The containment field is worsening the neural instability. The officer responded without looking away from the monitors. Containment is mandatory during royal emergency procedures. Not in cases involving recursive neural collapse, she replied. You're stabilizing the environment at the cost of the patient's internal regulation. There was a pause. Selk overheard the exchange. He turned. Your assessment is noted, he said. However, deviation from containment protocol without authorization is not permitted. Mara met his gaze. Then he won't survive protocol. Silence followed. Not tension. Calculation. Selk reviewed the data again. Then again. For the first time since the emergency began, he considered something outside the established framework. The readings still didn't make sense. And the prince's condition was still deteriorating. Slowly, but irreversibly, he made a decision. Not a formal override. Not a recorded deviation. A temporary adjustment. Reduce containment field intensity by 15%, he instructed. The officer hesitated. That falls below minimum stabilization threshold. Do it. The field adjusted. Immediately, Mara stepped forward. Further reduction is required, she said. His system is compensating against external suppression. You need to allow partial autonomic recalibration. Selk studied her for a moment, then nodded. Proceed. For the first time, the human was granted controlled access. She moved quickly, not hesitantly, not cautiously, decisively. She requested manual access to the diagnostic interface and overlaid a different analytical model, one based on trauma response rather than systemic failure. What she identified was not a primary organ collapse. It was a cascading overload triggered by a neural feedback loop, something akin to an acute stress-induced synaptic failure, compounded by environmental interference. In human medicine, this would be treated as a form of severe neurological trauma requiring both environmental adjustment and direct neural stabilization. The Zelther approach had focused on systemic isolation. Mara's approach focused on functional restoration. Adjust neural dampening, she said, not suppression modulation. She began recalibrating the interface settings, aligning the prince's neural rhythm with a controlled external feedback pattern designed to reduce overload without eliminating activity. At the same time, she instructed the partial deactivation of the containment field in phases, ensuring that external stabilization was maintained without constraining internal regulation. The Dominion team watched, some with hesitation, some with skepticism, but none intervened, because despite the deviation from protocol, the prince's vitals began to stabilize. Not immediately, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The irregular neural spikes began to smooth. Cardiac rhythm regained consistency. Oxygen processing normalized. The downward trend halted, then reversed. Selk monitored the readings in silence. He had followed every approved procedure. And yet, it was the human intervention, unorthodox, unapproved, and technically outside jurisdiction, that had altered the outcome. After several tense minutes, Prince Kael Vorith's condition stabilized to a critical but manageable state. The emergency was not over, but the immediate threat had passed. Only then did Selk speak. Your method did not comply with Dominion protocol. Mara removed her hands from the interface. No, she replied. Pause. It didn't. Another officer stepped forward. By interfering without authorization, you violated royal medical law. Mara looked at them, calm, unapologetic. Then update the law, she said. No one responded immediately, because the implications were clear. If she had waited for permission, the prince would not have survived long enough for permission to matter. Selk reviewed the full sequence again, this time incorporating her adjustments into the outcome analysis. The conclusion was unavoidable. Protocol had been followed correctly, and still it had failed to account for the specific nature of the crisis. Mara had not ignored procedure out of negligence. She had recognized its limitation in a scenario it was not designed to handle. Later, when the situation had fully stabilized and the royal vessel resumed controlled operations, the Dominion Council reviewed the incident. Some argued that protocol must remain absolute. Others acknowledged that rigid adherence, while essential for consistency, could not replace adaptive judgment in unprecedented conditions. In the official record, the event was documented carefully. No blame assigned, no violations enforced. But one note was added by the senior medical authority overseeing the review. Outcome achieved through non-protocol intervention under critical conditions. Recommendation: integrate cross-species emergency adaptability into royal medical frameworks. As for Prince Kael Vorith, he recovered fully, and in the days that followed, he requested to meet the human who had intervened during his emergency, not as a formality, but as someone who had, in a moment beyond rank and law, chose action over permission, because in the end, the difference between protocol and survival had come down to a single decision: when to stop waiting and start saving a life.